As I get slightly older and slightly wiser, it's becoming more and more apparent that we humans live lives full of contradiction. Echoes of my father telling me to always tell the truth are outweighed by the times that I've been scolded for being too blunt and too outspoken, being encouraged to treat myself and then reminded to save for the future can be a pretty baffling thought process too. But the one that really gets to my core is when I hear someone say, "Don't reinvent the wheel." Let's start with the obvious. If we didn't reinvent the wheel, then the wheel would still look like this. Yes, it did the job thousands of years ago, but it's completely unprepared for today's world. And thank goodness we have those natural innovators on our planet who insisted on reinventing that wheel time and time again. I mean, can you imagine your life without it? So why is it that people are still using this phrase to the point where it's become so common we rarely even challenge it? All too often, we're shying away from reinventing that wheel. Now, here's where the contradiction really kicks in. A good friend and ex-colleague of mine was a teacher with a great job and respected reputation. That same friend is now a travel blogger and charity ambassador who set himself the most inspirational challenge of getting from London to Brisbane without taking a single flight. When he revealed his life-changing plans to the world, he was met with nothing but support and encouragement, making it clear this type of reinvention was one accepted by society. Human lifestyle reinvention is okay with us. Another prime example of reinvention is the mobile phone that you're using today. Today's era of technology and communication is very different to what it was 10 years ago. That type of reinvention is one not only accepted by society, but one that we eagerly await. Now, these are fairly surface-deep examples of things that have been conflicting that advice to reinvent. They're contradicting it and going ahead and reinventing anyway. But what if I told you that that same phrase that causes that reluctance to reinvent could be having a profound impact on the future of our world? Bringing this back to something that I'm truly passionate about: education. Disappointingly, through all of the innovations I've lived through, I'm yet to see our education system get that reinvention that our students truly deserve. Everyone in this room will agree that the world has changed dramatically in the last 100 years. But some of you will be alarmed when I inform you that the major education systems currently in use were invented over 100 years ago. These education systems were invented in a time when global travel wasn't accessible to the average family, the internet wasn't even an idea, and racism was widely accepted. Should we really still be teaching our students using these same systems that were invented in those days? Back when the main aim of schools was to produce workers suited to a factory setup? Yes, there have been adjustments with the introduction of subjects such as computer science, media studies. Yes, there are educators out there who recognize a need for this change, who have implemented very successful initiatives to bring aspects of education up to date, but the core of the system has remained the same for far too long. Think back to the last 6 months of your life. How many of the major problems you had could be solved by something that you learned in school? My guess is not that many. It's 2017, and we're exposed to more of the world than ever before as we become increasingly connected, both physically and virtually. This has resulted in how global and our personal problems evolving, but I often wonder whether our skills are evolving with them. At the heart of education is still content knowledge. Content knowledge is essentially just knowing stuff. The internet knows stuff. We need to know how to find that stuff on the internet effectively and efficiently. Surely our students should be acquiring the skills to navigate and to thrive in this minefield world that we live in today. With this in mind, we really need to be reconsidering the way that we identify core subjects. We currently tell our students that the core subjects are English, mathematics, and science. Whilst important, I can't help feeling that this is a little unfair. Our students are individuals in their own rights, but the current education system often forces them to pause their passions whilst they put all of their hard work and efforts into these so-called core subjects. One might argue that perhaps this isn't making the most of that increasingly connected and evolving world that we live in today. When you were growing up, no doubt you had a vision of what you wanted to be. Now imagine you went to school, and instead of being taught the same generic content knowledge about a certain book or a certain country, you were allowed to explore your passions and decide on your own pathway. Imagine you had a teacher who was more concerned with equipping you with the skills to learn and access the world's opportunities rather than teaching you that same generic content knowledge. Where could you be now? All things considered, I have to admit, I'm extremely fortunate to be in a position where I regularly meet educators with a shared vision for this change. I'm certainly not alone with my point here, or my efforts to reinvent the education system at my school. But I think it's time for an even bigger change on a global scale. We're peering over the edge of a fourth industrial revolution. The way we communicate, live, and work is changing rapidly. Our students should be at the forefront, not left behind. Let's look back at the reinvention of the wheel. At the moment, our education system seems to have paused somewhere here. But our students are trying to live in a world that's way over here. Our students need the wheel of education suited to the road of 2017 and beyond. Thank you.